The Louisville police officer who fired the shot that killed Breonna Taylor, a black emergency room technician whose death set off a wave of protests on American streets, was told on Tuesday that the department was moving to oust him from the force, as was a second officer who obtained a judge's approval for the poorly planned nighttime raid on her home. The move is the most significant acknowledgement by the department that its officers had committed serious violations when they burst through Ms. Taylor's door late one night in March, encountered gunfire, and then fired a volley of shots at her and her boyfriend. The terminations mark an effort by the city's interim police chief, Yvette Gentry, to achieve the reckoning she promised when she came out of retirement to lead the troubled department into the beginning of the new year. Lawyers for Detective Miles Cosgrove, one of the officers who shot Ms. Taylor, and Detective Joshua James, who prepared the search warrant for the raid, said each had received notices of termination. Both have been on administrative reassignment as the investigations have been underway. Until now, the only officer held accountable in the case had been Brett Hankerson, a detective, who was fired in June for violating the department's deadly force policy by shooting off 10 rounds from outside the apartment through 2 of Ms. Taylor's windows. He was indicted by a grand jury in September on 3 counts of wanton endangerment because shots he fired entered a neighboring apartment. The killing of Ms. Taylor, which rose to national attention around the time of the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis in May, helped fuel protests from Portland, Oregon, to New York that called on cities to divert money from their police departments. Each development in the case seemed to bring more outrage, from the fact that none of the officers had been wearing body cameras to the announcement in September that only Mr. Hankerson, and neither of the 2 officers who shot her, would be charged. The anger persisted even after the protests over Mr. Floyd's death subsided, as protesters asked who was safe from the police if officers could kill a promising young woman in her own home and remain on the payroll. As the months dragged on, the city's inaction came to be seen by many in Louisville as representative of a culture of impunity, and a message that there were few consequences for police officers who killed black residents. Mayor Greg Fisher, a Democrat, resisted calls to fire the previous police chief until June, when a popular restaurant owner was shot and killed as police officers and National Guardsmen attempted to disperse public demonstrations over Ms. Taylor's death. But when Chief Gentry, who retired in 2015, took over as interim chief, she promised a different approach. She did the heavy lifting that many men before her, many chiefs, have been unable to do, said Jessica Green, the chairwoman of the City Council's Public Safety Committee. She said she expected that more officers would be disciplined. Chief Gentry, who is black, has been clear that she is not interested in a permanent appointment, and her time as interim chief is soon coming to a close. Mr. Fisher is expected to announce a permanent chief early in 2021, but he has kept the search under wraps. Whoever takes the job will face a mountainous challenge. When the city asked residents what qualities they wanted from a police chief, nearly a quarter of respondents urged the city to defund the police. Ms. Taylor's family and activists have demanded criminal charges, a decision that now rests with the FBI, whose agents are reviewing the case for possible federal crimes, such as civil rights violations. The Justice Department, which oversees the FBI, has scaled back its oversight of local police forces under President Trump, and on Tuesday, the department announced it was not bringing any charges after a years-long investigation into the police killing of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old black boy in Cleveland who was shot while holding a pellet gun. President-elect Joseph R. Biden Jr. has condemned Ms. Taylor's killing but said little about the decision not to file charges against any other officers. The March 13 raid, in which Louisville officers were searching for evidence in a drug case, was compromised by poor planning and reckless execution, a New York Times review of witness accounts, video footage and officer statements showed. For nearly 30 minutes after Ms. Taylor was shot, she received no medical care.